The sun hovered like a molten coin above the endless plains, painting the sky with streaks of fire that danced across the horizon. Dust devils spiraled in the distance as the lone figure of Clay McAllister appeared on the ridge, his horse's hooves pounding the hard, cracked earth. Clay was a man of the West, broad-shouldered, face weathered by years under the sun, with a glare sharp enough to silence a saloon. Folks in town whispered about him. Some said he was a killer, others said he was a hero. The truth was somewhere in between. He had a temper like a rattlesnake in a tin can, but beneath the surface, loss and loneliness had forged a heart capable of quiet, stubborn loyalty. That afternoon, the wind shifted, carrying with it a faint, acrid smell. Clay sniffed the air, narrowing his eyes. Smoke. Not from a campfire, either, a lingering, bitter tang that made his stomach tighten. He guided his horse closer, riding with the ease of someone born to the saddle, scanning the horizon for the source. As he crested a small rise, the sight stopped him cold. A homestead, once modest and cheerful, now stood in ruin. The roof sagged, and the walls bore black streaks where fire had licked hungrily at the wood. The door hung open on rusted hinges, and the yard was littered with broken furniture and scorched tools. The silence was eerie, broken only by the creaking of the door and the occasional caw of a circling crow. Clay felt a pulse of anger rise in his chest, not at the homestead, not at the wind, but at the world that allowed this kind of cruelty to happen. And then he heard it, a faint, frightened whimper. Clay's eyes scanned the wreckage until he spotted them, 4 girls huddled together behind what was left of a wall. Their clothes were torn and filthy, and their faces streaked with dirt and tears. The youngest, no more than 8, clutched a doll missing one eye, shivering despite the warm afternoon. The eldest, maybe 16, tried desperately to shield the others, but fear had her frozen in place. Clay's jaw tightened. He dismounted and approached cautiously, hands relaxed but ready. "Hey," he called, his voice rough, carrying the weight of authority and something softer beneath. The girls flinched, eyes wide as saucers. None of them had seen a man in weeks, and certainly not a man with a reputation like Clay's. "I ain't here to hurt ya," he said, lowering his voice. "But y'all can't stay here. Not safe. Not one bit." The eldest girl's voice quivered. They'll come back. They said." She stopped, swallowing hard. Clay could see the flicker of terror in her eyes, the unspoken horrors she couldn't articulate. "They won't matter no more," Clay said firmly. "I'll handle it. Come with me." The girls hesitated. Fear warred with desperation. But something in Clay's presence, a mix of anger at the injustice done and an unshakable resolve, made them trust him. Slowly, hesitantly, they rose. Clay handed each of them a blanket he carried in his saddlebag. "Wrap up. Ride easy. We're goin' somewhere safe." The journey to Clay's ranch was long, the sun dipping lower with every mile. Clay rode beside the girls, silently keeping watch. Coyotes howled in the distance, and the wind whispered through the tall grass, but no harm came near them. He thought about the path ahead, the work, the lessons, the life they would build together. His anger simmered, no longer aimless but purposeful. That night, they camped near a creek under a sky full of stars. Clay built a fire while the girls huddled together, their eyes wide, taking in the warmth, the crackling sound, and the smell of smoke that was somehow comforting this time. "Eat," he said, offering a bit of jerky and bread. "We've got a long road ahead, but you'll be safe now." As they ate in silence, Clay studied their faces. The youngest peeked at him, curiosity overcoming fear for a moment. The eldest met his gaze and nodded, a silent acknowledgement of trust. Clay felt something he hadn't in years, a flicker of hope. He wasn't just angry anymore. He had a purpose, a reason to channel that fury into something lasting. By the time they reached the outskirts of his ranch, the sun had disappeared, leaving the sky a deep, bruised purple. The girls, exhausted, leaned on their new protector. Clay's heart, buried under layers of grit and anger, softened. Tomorrow, he promised himself, he would start the work of not just keeping them alive, but giving them a life worth living. Clay's ranch had always been a place of harsh practicality, a small cluster of buildings surrounded by dry, unforgiving land. It was built for survival, not comfort, and it bore the scars of years of storms and neglect. Yet, to Clay, this rugged land represented opportunity, a chance to protect the girls, and perhaps, to build something that mattered beyond himself. The morning after their arrival, he woke the sisters early. "Time to work," he said gruffly. The words sounded harsher than he intended, but they carried weight. The girls stirred reluctantly, rubbing sleepy eyes and trying to remember how to trust a man who was, until recently, a stranger. Clay started with small tasks. "We fix this roof first," he said, pointing to the barn, whose shingles had been torn away by wind and age. He handed the eldest, Sarah, a hammer, while the middle sisters carried nails and planks. The youngest, Emily, was instructed to sweep the floor and gather loose wood. At first, the girls were clumsy, unfamiliar with tools, and frustration flared in their eyes. But Clay's patience, though gruff, was steady. He showed them how to hold the hammer, how to judge a plank, and how to secure a nail without splitting the wood. As the sun rose higher, sweat stinging their eyes, something remarkable happened. The girls began to work in sync, laughing softly when a nail bent, celebrating quietly when a board fit perfectly. For the first time in weeks, their laughter wasn't tinged with fear. Clay, watching from a distance, felt a strange swell of pride. The anger that had burned in him since finding them shifted, tempered by hope and purpose. By the end of the week, the barn was not just repaired, it was reinforced. Clay introduced the girls to horse care next. He guided them through brushing, feeding, and saddling, insisting that they learn every detail of ranch life. They stumbled at first, the horses wary of new hands, but soon they moved confidently, laughing as the animals nudged them or snorted. Clay even taught them how to ride properly, keeping a close hand on their safety while letting them taste the thrill of freedom that only the open plains could offer. But he had more ambitious plans. One morning, Clay gathered the sisters in front of the barn. "We're not just surviving anymore," he said, voice hard with determination. "We're gonna build something that'll make folks around here stop and take notice. Something strong. Something ours." He outlined the idea: an expanded barn that could double as a fortress, a garden to feed them year-round, a windmill to draw water from the creek. The girls' eyes widened. The dream seemed impossible at first, yet something about Clay's conviction made them believe. Weeks turned into months. Every day, the ranch transformed. The girls learned how to pour stone for a foundation, how to lift heavy timbers, and how to weave fences strong enough to deter both wild animals and wandering bandits. They painted walls with bright colors salvaged from old buildings, carved signs marking each area of the property, and created hidden rooms in the barn for supplies and emergencies. Clay insisted on lessons that extended beyond survival. He scavenged old books from abandoned homesteads and taught the girls reading and writing. The barn became a schoolroom, the garden a science lab, the windmill a lesson in engineering. Evenings were for storytelling, music, and games, where laughter replaced the terror that had haunted their lives. The transformation was astonishing, not just of the ranch, but of the girls themselves. Fear and despair gave way to skill, confidence, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Neighbors began to notice. Travelers passing through would stop, curious at the sight of the expanded barn, the vibrant garden, and the girls confidently tending horses or hauling supplies. Rumors spread of a cowboy who had taken in 4 abandoned sisters and turned a forgotten homestead into a fortress of ingenuity. Some came seeking shelter, others came with awe. No one could deny that something remarkable was happening at the McAllister Ranch. And yet, through it all, Clay's temper remained, though now it had purpose. He was fierce when safety was threatened, stern when laziness crept in, and unyielding when the girls' courage faltered. But it was tempered by love, a quiet, steady force that none of the sisters had ever known before. Slowly, the angry cowboy became a teacher, a protector, and the anchor of a family that had nearly been lost to the cruelty of the Wild West. By the time the first winter frost touched the plains, the ranch had become a place of warmth and life. The barn stood tall, the garden flourished, and the girls, once ragged and frightened, had blossomed into skilled, confident young women. Clay watched them from the porch one evening, a faint smile tugging at his rugged face, knowing that together they had built something extraordinary. Not just a home, but a life worth living. Word of the McAllister Ranch spread like wildfire across the territory. Travelers passing through the plains would pause at the sight of the towering barn, the neatly fenced garden, and the windmill that drew water from the creek with quiet mechanical precision. Even outlaws whispered in taverns about the place where a gruff cowboy had taken in 4 abandoned sisters and built something that seemed impossible. The ranch had become more than a home. It was a symbol of resilience in a land where danger was as common as dust. The sisters themselves had changed beyond recognition. Sarah, the eldest, now moved with the confidence of someone who had weathered every storm life could throw at her. She managed the barn with authority, giving instructions to the younger girls while Clay supervised, proud but careful not to overstep. Lila, the second oldest, had a knack for mechanics and often tinkered with the windmill or devised clever traps for the perimeter of the ranch. Jane, always quick-witted, had become an exceptional horse trainer, while Emily, the youngest, brought joy and laughter wherever she went, her laughter a counterpoint to the harsh winds of the plains. Clay watched them with a quiet satisfaction. His anger had long since transformed into a fierce protectiveness, tempered by admiration for the girls' courage. He no longer saw them as children in need of rescue, he saw them as equals in the creation of something extraordinary. Every nail driven, every board lifted, every meal cooked together had forged a bond that no bandit, storm, or lawless man could break. One evening, as the sky bled deep oranges and purples into the horizon, Clay gathered the girls on the porch. "Look at what we've done," he said, voice softer than it had ever been. "None of this happened by accident. We built it together." The sisters, sitting side by side, looked out at the ranch bathed in the golden light of sunset. The barn gleamed, the garden's last blossoms swayed in the breeze, and the windmill creaked rhythmically, a testament to their shared labor. A distant howl of a coyote reminded Clay that the West was never fully tamed. Yet, for the first time, he felt a sense of permanence, a rare peace in a land that often offered none. He thought back to the day he had found them huddled behind the burned remains of their family home, their fear palpable. How far they had come. How much they had grown. And how, somehow, he himself had grown along with them. Their work didn't go unnoticed. A local sheriff once stopped by, skeptical at first, but left with admiration. Traders from nearby towns would bring supplies and news, often staying for a meal and marveling at the efficiency of the ranch. Even some of the rougher elements of the West, men who had once scoffed at the idea of women on a ranch, began to acknowledge the sisters' skill and bravery. The McAllister Ranch had become a hub of safety, ingenuity, and respect, a rare oasis in the unpredictable Wild West. Clay realized that he had built more than buildings and fences. He had built a sanctuary for the vulnerable, a space where fear had been replaced by courage, and where love and respect forged stronger bonds than blood alone. The girls had become a family in every sense of the word, their laughter and cleverness filling every corner of the once desolate ranch. Clay himself, hardened by years of loss and solitude, had discovered the unexpected joy of family life, of watching others flourish because of his guidance and protection. One cold morning, when frost had iced the edges of the windmill and the first smoke from the chimney curled into the gray dawn, a young traveler arrived at the ranch. He looked at the barn, the fences, and the girls working confidently in the garden, and asked, incredulous, who built this place? Clay tipped his hat, a faint smile breaking his otherwise stoic face. "We all did," he said, eyes lingering on the girls as they moved with ease and grace. 4 sisters, 1 stubborn cowboy, and a whole lot of grit. As the traveler rode away, Clay turned to the sisters. "You know," he said quietly, "I reckon this ranch, it's more than a place. It's proof. Proof that even in a land this rough, we can make something that lasts. Something worth fighting for." The sisters laughed, and for a moment, the winds of the West seemed to hold their breath, as if acknowledging the transformation. What had begun with fear and abandonment had ended in hope, strength, and unity. The McAllister Ranch was no longer just a homestead, it was a fortress of resilience, a beacon for those who dared to dream, and a home that proved the impossible could be achieved when courage met determination. And Clay McAllister, once an angry cowboy wandering the harsh plains, finally understood the truth he had never admitted to himself. Sometimes, the strongest fences aren't made of wood or stone, they're made of heart, trust, and the unbreakable bonds of chosen family.